Be ready, and if not, I will just continue. All right. So welcome everybody to this webinar. Thank you for making time to attend. This webinar is titled "Thriving in COVID with Your Data, Trade Secrets, and Other Intangible Assets." Together with me here, I have my esteemed panelists. Firstly, Mr. Tyler Capson, from Managing Director Asia at EverEdge Global. Welcome, Tyler.
Thank you. Thank you.
Secondly, we have Mr. Benjamin Chua, founder of Spic and Span, and they are really a true story of how COVID has ignited the innovation in Singapore companies. And later on, we'll be very glad to hear about his story. Welcome, Benjamin. Last but not least, we have Mr. Ling Ting Ming, founder and Chief Executive Officer of OTSAW. And I'm not sure how many of you, but I've actually seen that those little vehicles that Ting Ming has come up with, really ingenious vehicles, and we hope to hear more about them later on. Welcome, Ting Ming.
Thank you.
Right. Just a little bit about housekeeping before we start the webinar proper. A bit of a house rules. All attendees are automatically put on mute to minimize disruption to the webinar. If you have questions later that you want to ask, do use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen so that we do not disrupt the flow of the webinar itself. We will actually pick up questions and we will post them to the panelists as and when they come about. We do apologize due to time constraints. We are not able to answer all the different questions, but do rest assured that we will have a variety of questions to make the webinar fun as well as exciting and useful for everybody. Okay, just a little bit about the format of this webinar. After this, I will actually hand the time over to the respective speakers, and they will introduce themselves as well as the companies and a little bit about what they do and how is it related to intellectual assets and intellectual property. After which, I will pose questions to get the seminar discussion going. And when that is done, I will leave some time for the floor to actually post your Q&A questions before we end the webinar itself. Right, so a little bit about myself. My name is Winston, and I'm board director at IPOS International. IPOS International is a fully owned subsidiary of the IP Office of Singapore, or IPOS, and within which there are many things that the organization does that promote as well as encourage the use of IP in companies. In essence, through IP strategy and management, patent search and analysis, as well as education and training. IPOS International work closely with public as well as private organizations to grow tangible value from their intangible assets. So if you have questions after this webinar, or you would like to find out more about intellectual assets and intellectual property, do feel free to get in touch with us. So without further ado, if I can invite Mr. Tyler to actually share with us as the first speaker. Tyler, I understand that you have your slides that are ready. Can I invite you to share your slides and to present your topic? Thank you, Tyler.
Yep. I can do that. All right. So thank you, Winston. Appreciate that very much. And I will go ahead and here we go. All right. This one. Share. All right, so hopefully now you can see my screen up there, and appreciate everyone's time in joining this webinar today. We have a pretty good group here, and it's been my pleasure to be able to present a few times at IP Week on various different topics. But one of the things that we're going to talk on, or I'm going to bring in initially, is just, what are intangible assets and why are they important? So a little bit about EverEdge and my company. Been around 12 years, and we work with companies big and small. And when I tell people what we do, I say, we are an intangible asset specialist. And When we talk about intangible assets, you've probably seen this slide before, this image before, showing the movement from the value of the S&P 500 over the last 40 years has moved dramatically from tangible assets on balance sheets to almost all intangible assets when it comes to the value of companies and proportionate of tangible to intangible. And now when you think about intangible assets, we're talking about not just legal rights, things that you're familiar with, such as patents and trademarks, which we talk a lot about, but it's also things like design, geographic marks, data, regulatory approvals, and brand. And really, these are the assets that become, the blood that work within the bones of the company. These are the things that make a company specifically unique. And I'll give you an example of this. So even if you took something like a small manufacturing firm and you take a look and you say, okay, where would a manufacturing firm actually have intangible assets? Well, if you break it down, almost every section, whether it's confidential information, data, you'll see that there are intangible assets that potentially drive significant value in that business. Things like customer lists, bill of materials, things like the collateral, things like domain names. Now, all of those assets kind of come together to become the overall assets of the business, and they're very valuable when they're all put together and used in combination. So let me use a quick case study or a quick example of this as well. So this is actually a photo of the original 12 people of Instagram when they were acquired by Facebook for $1 billion. At the time, they were only 2 years old, and they had very little assets. Okay, they probably had some servers, some laptops and things, 250,000 in assets, maybe an office, and that was about it. But yet, Facebook acquired them for $1 billion. And you think, well, how is this possible? And you put that in contrast to a company like Main Freight, who is a global shipping company. They also have $1 billion in revenue and 6,200 staff. They're 40 years old now. And again, they also have the same price tag or market value of $1 billion. How is this possible? Well, it tells us a couple of things, right? In these cases, even physical assets don't always stack up to what they can actually be sold for. You may have $2 billion in assets on the balance sheet, but somebody knows it's probably not worth that because of the age and stage. But when you look at what they have that was unique and different, is the Instagram was a scalable asset. All right, it could be expanded and grown. And to somebody like me, I wouldn't have paid $1 billion for Instagram because to me as an operating business, I didn't have the platform to be able to scale it and to grow it. Okay, but to somebody like Facebook, absolutely. And now look at the value of Instagram. It's almost 7 times that. So obviously they've made a very good purchase in that. And when you look at those assets and you see the companies that I've got on this slide, which shows how long it took them to reach that same $1 billion in market cap, you see some of the commonalities is that the companies on the right have very, very scalable assets, things that you can sell or license multiple times over, and not something where you just create a cup of coffee and you sell 1 cup of coffee, like Starbucks. The reason why Starbucks was successful over just a plain another coffee company was because they were able to have their model very scalable and expand very quickly, and they were able to replicate. So it still, even in that sense, took them 24 years to reach the same value, that $1 billion market cap. So it comes to a point on value. Now we're talking about intangible assets and why they're important, and the last session was on valuation. And if you listen, they talk about DCF and you talk about valuation of intangibles and businesses. Well, the rudimentary, metric to value businesses is normally, some type of a multiple on either revenue or a multiple of sales or a multiple of earnings. Okay, and So you take the cash flow from the business, you take all the fixed assets in cash, you add those up, and you get a company value, right? But when you add intangible assets on top of that, you gain a whole new asset class. You gain a whole new segment of value that is not typically seen. It is the strategic value from what you could have sold it from for somebody who, you know, a run-of-the-mill or likewise company, to actually somebody who has an opportunity to use that strategic value and actually scale it and grow it. So somebody that specifically wants that asset, specifically has need for that asset, can take that and grow it. And one of the exercises we do with companies to understand, you know, where do you understand intangible assets in your business? And as we start this, you know, this session, you know, ask yourself, are you at the bottom of the value chain in terms of, you know, completely in denial on, well, intangible assets, you can't see them, you can't touch them, therefore, do they really ever have that much value? I'm not going to take this stuff serious. And you might be in that denial category, all the way up to being maybe protective. Well, I'll protect it because I think it's valuable, so we're going to keep it safe. Or we might look at patenting something, or we might look at, you know, keeping something a secret if we know there's value there, all the way up to industry defining, which is something like companies and brands that do a really good job of making sure that everything they do, they're managing their brand, they're managing their data, they're managing, you know, their reputation, and all of that is embedded in how they work with the employees and how they work with their contractors and how they work with external suppliers and everyone. And they generate revenue through that. So hopefully that's given you a bit of an overview of what are intangible assets. And I just have 2 more slides here I want to run through, and I have a poll, which I do want to ask. And this first one is, which of these intangible assets are key value drivers of your company? If you think about what really drives value in your business, go ahead and jump in there and think, okay, these are some things that I have that I know are driving the value. Not that I have them, but those are the ones that are driving value in your business. I would just like to take a quick poll to understand, you know, where it is that people think is really, really the important parts of their businesses. So thank you for voting. We've got about 50 votes in so far. So take a look through that poll and tell me which one is driving the most value for your company. Great, great. So now we've got, all right. So if you look at that, based on the poll results, about 75% came in, expertise and know-how. Excellent, excellent. And so those are types of things that, you know, people, HR, if that is that case, if it's knowledge, if it's know-how, if it's people in your business, make sure that's being protected. Very interesting response there, and or results. Great. So one last questions that I have is, you know, a lot of times people say, well, how do I get started, and what are some questions that I can ask in my company to get to better understand, you know, intangible assets? So here's a couple of questions that you can ask. You can take a quick screenshot. You can get the slides afterwards. You don't have to write these down. In terms of, you know, what should I be asking in my company? How do I get started in better using intangible assets? And then last of all, if you want more information on those, or if you want those slides or the questions, feel free to drop me an email and we can get those over to you. But that is just a general info into EverEdge and into intangible assets that was hopefully valuable as we jump into the panel here. So thank you, Winston, and I will pass it back to you. You're on mute, Winston.
Thank you, Tyler. Yeah, I think you don't have such problem if you are having a seminar live, right? But webinar, these things happen. Anyway, thank you so much, Tyler. And it's interesting that we have seen that a lot of the participants here, in fact, almost 75% and above, actually thinks that expertise and know-how, right, are the key intellectual assets driving the business. And this is really interesting and really but congruent as well, even to our understanding of the Singapore businesses. Although there are companies with patents, registered designs, and other forms of registrable IP. What we have seen in our work is that a lot of these are put into solutions. And while putting into solutions is the know-how, it is the expertise that tie up all these IPs and make them useful, right? That there'll be people who wants to license it. There'll be people who wants to then make use of this IP to derive even their own solutions, right? And one of the companies that has actually done pretty well in putting together IP to derive solutions to meet the COVID demand is actually Benjamin from Spic and Span. I think we are all waiting eagerly to hear from him, his story of how he has actually tackled one of the biggest COVID problem, and that is in cleaning, right? If I could invite Benjamin now to also share your slides and to give us an introduction to your business and what you've done for COVID. Benjamin, please.
Thank you, Winston. Just doing a mic check and a screen check. Just want to make sure that my slides are in order. Okay, fantastic. Thank you for the warm introduction, as well as it looks like we have a really good crowd here, and we are really privileged to be part of the panel to be able to share more about what we have done so far, as well as probably what we're going to do in the future as well. I think we are currently ensuring that not only are we scaling, but we are also keeping our roots in the social enterprise sector. Because after all, we started as a social enterprise. We started hiring marginalized workers from ex-offenders to persons with disabilities. We want to ensure that this entire social footprint carries on while we upskill them, while we invest more in technology as well. So a bit more about the company. We developed Speco. Speco, it's a long-lasting disinfectant that I think is currently being used by some of the most important names across Singapore right now. So product-wise, we are 180 days long-lasting, but what we are actually providing here is that we are an end-to-end solution. We provide that level of confidence and assurance to businesses to allow them to open their businesses, to reopen their businesses, um, during this period of time. And the best part of it all is that our product is 100% non-toxic. Most of the other disinfectants out there in this market is currently highly toxic. They could harm, and you could have health problems after using them. So we intentionally develop our IP. We intentionally develop our product to be as such. So what are we actually doing here? What's our value proposition? What's our USP? We know that the entire landscape has changed. There are new norms that has been effected, and we found that there are gaps to the existing measures within the cleaning industry. I'll be sharing a bit more on why we feel that there are these gaps in the current solutions. We started off as a cleaning company. We started off doing regular cleaning, hiring of marginalized workers, and when there's a contamination, we do a terminal disinfection. However, when we found out that COVID can be transmitted through touch points, um, the main solutions that MOH, NEA, and the rest of the regulatory authorities all across the world have said that please increase your cleaning frequency using common disinfectants like Dettol and Mr. Muscle. But we find that even with stepped up cleaning, there's still a gap. That because regular disinfectants do not work once they are dry, so surfaces are actually not protected in between cleaning. And right now, especially when you have to ask your cleaners to do so frequent cleaning every hour, every 2 hours, who's the one supervising? The facility managers, the admin managers, the procurement managers. They are the ones that are speaking to these cleaners, making sure that they do their job, making sure that there's no cross-contamination, and this is quite unproductive. So there's always that nagging feeling on whether or not this place is actually clean. So we are here to address this gap, remove this preventable risk by starting the entire process using a protective layer. We were not a COVID player. We were actually developed before COVID had actually taken into place. We started the development years ago, wanting to upskill our workers. We were part of the ITM as well. In order for the government to push towards innovation and productivity, we invested in R&D. We got the lab test last year, and this year we tested it against coronavirus. So just to clarify that, we actually started before the COVID season. We were targeting E. coli, Salmonella. We were going to preschools. We were going to elderly nursing homes. But just so happened that our product is also effective against coronavirus. So we rode the tailwinds as well. We are currently being used by some of the most important names across Singapore. Right now, our main client within Changi Airport is actually Singapore Airlines. We were actually featured yesterday on the news as well for firms being innovative against COVID-19. We have some big players. Sequoia Capital is one of them. They invested in Zoom, Alibaba, as well as some of these um, local big players. How does the technology actually work? For speckle wise, it does bind to both porous and non-porous surfaces. So what this means is that when we actually do the application, the scope of application is very wide. From glass, metal, plastic to door handles, all the way to hotel industries, hospitality industries like your bed sheets, fabric, leather. It can be used on all surfaces. We intentionally developed the product to be so wide in application so that for scaling, it is very helpful for us. It punctures envelope virus, and the main thing here is that when we develop this technology, we didn't want to take away jobs. Our main intention here is not to use technology to replace workers. It's here to complement the workers. So whenever people ask us like, so by using Speckle, does it mean that I can, cut down on my workforce, my cleaning workforce or my housekeeping workforce? We tell them that over here, we still do recommend stepped up cleaning. It does work very well with daily housekeeping. It works very well even with Dettol and Mr. Muscle being applied on top of it. It does not remove the speckle coating. So this is just a complemented tool for you to have that level of assurance that your place is clean 24/7. So that's our entire brand message. uh, this is part of our IP as well. The regulatory approvals. We have international accreditation right now. We are a certified B Corporation. This is something that international organizations that engage us are very interested in because there are probably only 12 companies here in Singapore that have this level of accreditation that focuses so much on responsible, sustainable technology. We intentionally created Speckle to be non-toxic, biodegradable, and safe. This is something that I have a strong connection to as well. We want to have sustainable technology that does not harm us as humans, your materials, or any other forms of harmful health effects. And that's why when we had our lab test, this was something that we were really excited about, that Speckle, there's no health effects even if it enters your eyes. Unlike other disinfectants that once you touch your eyes, you have to wash it out. If it goes into your stomach, you probably have to get your stomach pumped. So this is something that we are really very proud of. And the one thing that we were really, really privileged to have in terms of R&D is that over chronic exposure. This is so important because we are something that's long lasting. We are binding it to your surfaces where people actually touch it on a day-to-day basis. So imagine this being a harmful toxic substance being binded to your surfaces that you're going to be using for the next 2 years. This is something that I think has allowed me to sleep at night, to be able to create something that does not harm us as humans. A bit more about our company. We are a social enterprise. We still are. We have developed more technology right now because we have an R&D team. We are developing even more now, enhancing our formulas, making sure that it's more effective, faster kill rate against the coronaviruses. We are inventing new things to be able to tackle different areas in terms of hygiene and sanitation as well. So we have a patent pending right now, so this is our IP. We have a ton of awards here in Singapore as well as overseas. We have received Asia Pac awards. We are internationally accredited, and locally we have regulatory authority to do work as well. Lab tests, we do have positive lab tests against coronaviruses as well. So this is part of our IP strategy as well, especially when we are moving overseas. We need to make sure that we are we have good protection of our data, we have good protection of our know-hows. This is so important because I think aside from being a tech play, performance does matter. Investors look at us and say, what if someone has reverse engineered your product? Then are we something more than just a tech play? Are we an execution play then? So these are things that are things that I really do consider when preparing our IP strategy. These are things that we consider when we talk to our lawyers, how we actually brand ourselves, how do we actually protect the selected important trees in the entire forest, because we are an SME still. We are SME, we cannot afford protecting everything. So what are the strategic points that we can protect? What are the strategic points that we have? What are our differentiating factors? These are what creates value for Spic and Span as a company, as an organization. And I think that we really have to thank EverEdge, because EverEdge was part of this process. We have to also thank iPost as part of this process as well. They really did help us even before COVID struck, in order for us to be really ready, for us to secure our supply chains, for us to have that difficult chat with our R&D department to make sure that the IP really belongs to us. So all these were actually secured beforehand so that we don't face this issue when it's time to scale. Imagine we did not secure these things last year and the year before. We will have a much tougher time now. Probably our manufacturers will have sold our recipe to someone else. Probably our supply chain could have leaked something else, and probably our scientists could have taken this and created Speco 2.0 or Specky or whatsoever. So IP protection is really important. We did not pay too much heed to it previously as well. We were thinking, do we really need it as a SME? The answer is a very clear, resounding yes. You never know when you need it. And we were really glad that we worked with iPost, we worked with EverEdge to make sure that we secure all this beforehand. The last part for my presentation is something that really touched my heart, and really we wanted to ensure that we stuck to our true north as a social enterprise. Throughout our entire journey as a SE, we were upskilling, hiring, enabling marginalized Singaporeans to earn a living. But I think when we invested in R&D, the main thought was that, do we really want the cleaners to be cleaning the same toilets for the next 20 years? I think we did not want that. We wanted them to have some hope. We wanted them to move up the value chain. For them to move up the value chain, us as a company, we have to move up the value chain as well, and thus our direction towards that segment of the market. But when COVID first hit, I think we were very concerned about the most vulnerable in our society as well, the elderly. The charities as well, they did not have the budget for Speco services. So I think it was a dilemma for us, whether should we scale commercially or should we spend some time protecting our elderly, going to nursing homes, making sure that the place is clean, pro bono work. I'm quite glad that we still have stuck to our social enterprise route. We still have stuck to our social impact. We protected more than 60,000 elderlies all across Singapore during these 6 months. And we understand that SMEs, some of them could have been struggling as well. So we did set aside a pay it forward campaign as well. This is something that's very close to me, because at the end of the day, COVID will pass. COVID will pass. We hope that after COVID has passed, Singapore will have more companies of good. Our ecosystem of people that are more caring would have increased as well. So I think this is something that, since we have a technology, we use it for good, and hopefully we spin off more companies that are focused and driven towards the social good. I think this is what we believe in as well. That's all I have. Thank you so much for the time.
Thank you, Benjamin. Certainly a very inspiring story of how a company with good technology can also be used to benefit the less fortunate, as well as a certain sector of the population, which is the elderly. And another thing that struck me, even as I listened to Benjamin, is that there is a patent pending, right? Which means that the patent is yet to be granted. But if you can see, the business model of Spic and Span has been designed in such a way that even though the patent that is pending, it doesn't stop the company from actually doing the business as it's supposed to do. Which means it shows me and it tells me that besides the patent itself, there are actually other nuggets of gold that the company has, which is they are already using to actually do the business, right? So there is a whole bundle of IP, IA that is in the company that has actually caused the company to be able to thrive even in such a situation, even as they wait for the patent to be approved, right? And with that, I just want to move over to Ting-Ming now. Ting-Ming, as I understand, you already have granted patents. You have already have granted registered designs as well. And like Benjamin, I'm quite sure you have a whole war chest nuggets of other IP that you have in your company that allows you to do what you do. So without further ado, can I pass the time over to Ting-Ming? Looking forward to your sharing as well.
Okay, thank you, Winston. I'll share my screen now. Okay, thank you for having me this afternoon. So I would like to first give a bit of background of OTSAW before we go into the COVID and IP solutions and all that, right? So we started back in 2015 in San Francisco as well as in Singapore. And this is my team currently, about 30 over guys, which consists of R&D, production, and our service operations team. So again, due to COVID, there's a lot of demand on some of these technologies that we have been building. And that actually allowed us to grow. We are looking at to about 50 over guys by the next 2 months. Okay. So our mission is very simple. We are looking at what we call labor-intensive, low-skills jobs, which we can use robots to augment those operations. So our core, business is developing autonomous drive technologies and robotics. Right? So a bit about our journey since 2015. But we spent 2 years developing this software, which is autonomous tech software. And in May 2017, we actually launched our OR3 prototype, which is the outdoor security, autonomous security robot. Itself has a UAV and UGV built in. This picture you're seeing actually is in the Bay Area during then. And then in 2018, we actually start to build the pre-production unit, which was launched during Communic Asia in June 2018. And thereafter, we had our factory set up in Singapore, which is in Tampines, and start to roll out the mass production. So January 2019, we started to roll out our OR3. You might see this robot familiar in the reservoirs, like Bedok reservoirs, and PUB has been using our robot even prior to COVID. But during COVID, it also doubled up as a safe distancing ambassador as well. And fast forward 2020, April, which was during the initial period of the COVID, we also launched our indoor security robot called OR2. So due to temperature taking, we also embedded a thermometer on top of the robot so that it can allow what we call humanless, contactless temperature taking. So it also has this facial recognition, capability as well. Right? And we also integrated safe entry into the system. So it allows a seamless one queue. You can do temperature taking and safe safe entry as well. Then during the lockdown, actually, that was a very difficult time for us. From April to June, we actually developed this robot within 60 days. I would say it was a big challenge for the entire team because no doubt we were under essential service, still this very inconvenient during that period. But we have requests from our customer to look at disinfection robot. And we actually work round the clock over 60 days to build this robot. And we also receive a very big so-called response from the market itself, right? And the last product that we're going to launch, which is sometime in September, is a last mile delivery robot, which again, post-COVID, people looking at food delivery, parcels delivery more than ever. We're talking about humanless and contactless again, right? Okay. So our service model is very simple. It's robot as a service. You do not have to own those assets or equipment. Low cost of entry, no cost of ownership. It's like you pay salary to the guards, now you pay salary to the robot. So it's an OPEX model. easy to go. And we have a lot of grants in place from the government, such as IMDA, up to 80% grant to take up all these solutions as in the transformation track, right? So our core technology built in-house revolves into all these so-called self-driving technology. So we have our in-house 3D SLAM, mapping, sensor fusion, AI, level 5 autonomous tech. And that's where all these intangible assets and IP protection is needed, within our organization, because we are a tech company, and the essence of our company is all this technology that we have developed over time, right? So we have actually filed back in the early days of 2017. So during then, in US, I think California, they have a 6 months fast track, which was very good for us. We got our patent approved within 6 months. And thereafter, we also filed the IP in Singapore as well, and we got it approved as well. So this actually, along the way, really helped us in terms of our, fundraising exercise, because every investors that comes aboard, always ask that magic question, how do you get your valuation, right? So of course, being a technology company, right, all the essence of the company is the technology itself. So not just able to demonstrate it, but how do we protect all these so-called assets in a way that we can enforce in certain jurisdiction, right? And along the way, we learned a lot in the early years that, there's so much things about all this IP. We learned from IPOS, we learned from Tyler as well. He actually came and helped us as well along the way. So I would say it's a journey. We almost learn new things every now and then, and the market is so dynamic and so volatile. So it is something very exciting over the last 5 years. So I would like to focus more on this ORX, which is our star product, if I may say. So actually, ever since we launched 15th of June, we were awarded by the Mobile Robot Guide, the US Guide, as the most innovative robot, for the fact that this is the world's first UVC LED robots. So most of the robots you will see out there are using mercury lamp. So we are using LED, which is eco-friendly, energy efficient, and also is safe for the human skin as well. And I think if you're talking about a large area of so-called surface disinfection, sometimes you do need machines to help you to augment all these operations. And today, I think this machine, we have gone through the lab test as well, through TUV. And also just last week, we got through our lab test on coronavirus. So E. coli bacteria and coronavirus on the efficacy of this technology itself. So we are talking about within 5 minutes, we are able to disinfect 99.9%. This is the live human coronavirus that we have tested in the lab at a distance of 2.5 meters. So again, the emphasis here is also contactless, because I think contactless itself could be very new concept in this part of the world. In UK, in Europe, actually, a lot of these hospitals or airports, they've been using it even prior to pre-COVID. Yeah. So we're trying to have this technology in this part of the world, and in fact, we're exporting to the rest of the world as well. Yeah. Yeah. So this is the press release that actually went out just 2 days ago, that we have just made the first live coronavirus sample tested successfully on this UVC LED disinfection robot within 5 minutes. So we are talking about in 5 hours operation time, when the robot is fully charged, it can disinfect up to 20,000 square feet of area. And we are talking about, almost the walls, the floors, and all the surfaces around the robot at a radius of 2.5 meters. So in fact, that is very, very efficient and very productive. And it's autonomous. It can even integrate with the lift to call the lift and take it to different floors. So not just horizontally, but vertically, as we live in all these high-rise buildings, right? Okay. So in terms of these, you know, design-wise, if you may see, why would I put a comparison here is what you see out there. You see a robot base and they put the mercury lamp on top. So OTSAW's approach is very different. We design the product, brand new. We do not look at just the light as in the design approach, but we look at the product. So as you can see, the robot will look more agile, look more intelligent. It can go into the lift, and the design concept is there. It's more of a very polished design. Imagine if you were to compare these two designs, if the robot were to be in the airport doing the disinfection, which one will look better in a sense, right? So the design aspect also is very important, and we have actually also found the design of our robot as well, because we do not want anybody to copy our robot and have all the me tools in the market. So we are always, looking at how do we differentiate ourselves, not to get in the space of just pure price war. So if you notice, the rest of the other makers they are facing is because they all look alike, and therefore it's only price, right? They don't, because customers usually do not have that sort of information. So through all these things, we are trying to educate them. How do we position ourselves in terms of our design, in terms of our technology? So for the UVC LED, we also actually found the technology pattern as well. Yeah. So this is the design that we have registered. Yeah. Yeah. So I think with that, I will end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ting Ming. I'm sure that was a really long and fruitful journey that you have with developing of your technology, as well as protecting the IP, right, as you go along, right? I would just want to move on to a little bit of a Q&A. And I actually have questions prepared, but looking at the quality of the questions that are coming in, I'm very tempted to go straight into the floor, right? So, panelists, if you could actually indulge me, I think it provides a lot more fruitful discussion, and I can see the train of thoughts coming in from the floor already. What are some of the things that they are looking at? If I can just move to the first question. And that is actually from Joyce A. Tan. And this question is directed to Ting Ming, but I think the rest of the panelists, they can actually answer this as well. So I'll just read it out to you. Ting Ming, what was your company's IP strategy at the beginning of your business journey? Did you have a scheme of prioritization of what you focused on, and did that evolve over time? All right. Would you say, sorry, let me just go back to that question again. It jumped in a little while. Okay, I have it here.
Just the second one down, Winston. It's just right below it.
Okay. Would you say you are ready for a different phase, approach, and budget focus for IP in your business now? So I think the question is trying to say that what was your IP strategy at the start when you are just starting off and trying to get the first robot out in the market? And has that changed over time? Right, as you now have more resources and now that your operations is getting more complicated?
So definitely. So I recall back 5 years ago when I was in the Valley, I was working with my CTO, and day one, we were dreaming about building autonomous tech, and our end goal was to build a black box back then. So we had our strategy very clear day one. So even before we built our prototype, we already start to file the IP. Because of course, these guys are very techy, they know what they're doing. So we had those sorted out. But do we have, can we see right up to the end? To be honest, we surprise ourselves along the way each and every time. I would say never say never. And of course, with IPOS and Tyler that came along later on, did give us a lot of information and knowledge to, again, educate us along the way. So we learned a lot in the US, what they do in the early days. When I came back to Singapore, we also get connected with the Singapore IP scene, with IPOS and the consultants as well. And then the next thing you're saying, ready for the different phase, definitely. So, well, being in the forefront of technology, we always have to constantly pivot. Now, looking at the lockdown immediately, we never thought we would build a disinfection robot. But what else could we be doing, right, during those times? And it just came from a customer, and we thought, okay, let's jump into it. And we didn't really have to think of a strategy. It was so instant that we just go and do it. There's no time to think. So, and of course, with those experience that we have acquired over the years, the rightful thing is immediately file IP, file design, because we know that it's going to be a very competitive market. Everybody was going into it, right? I mean, it's just like face masks, right? Everybody's making face masks during that period. So I would say, I think the scene here is very good. We have all the information with all the agencies helping. So it really is very supportive. And I have seen the IP scene in Singapore has grown so much, over the last 5 years. Definitely, we will have to pivot from time to time.
Okay. Thank you, Ting Ming. I would just like to direct the same question now to Benjamin, right? Ben, if you could also give us just a tinge of what has happened, right, to your IP journey, right? Even as you start off with this Spic and Span, and then Aspeco. And after this answer, I will move on to Tyler next. Tyler, I have an interesting question for you, right? But before that, let's just listen to Benjamin. Yeah, your own journey, please.
I've been helping to clear the Q&A questions via text also. Like I've been answering to them via text as well. So maybe I would just like to put some context into it. Before Speco was out, we had that cleaning arm where we were housekeeping and doing the cleaning. There was pretty much not much IP involved there, because cleaning, it's a very low barrier to entry. We were probably a bit more productive than our competitors. We did adopt some technologies, but I think the conversation with IPOS when we first went to you guys to do an audit, to see what are the values what are the valuable items that we have within our company, was that, if we keep buying just better vacuum cleaners or something to clean your windows a bit better, every time I'm being featured, like maybe in a panel or on the news, my competitors will stare at me and say that, what is this guy using? Can we buy 100 of that? Then that's it really. My competitive advantage is then gone, because they have so much more resources than me, and they can probably go to market at much faster pace. So I think that was why we actually invested in R&D for the aspect. But even through the whole R&D process, I think the very first step, and I think I also addressed it in the text as well, is that as a bootstrap company, as an SME, financial resources is always at the top of our mind. How are we going to survive? It's always survival first, then we talk about protection and then scaling. So I think when you are in that survival mode, you tend to miss out a bit of things. And I think what IPOS has done is that they have really, we have really worked out with them. We went into a really in-depth discussion. I think the IPVL officer, IPOS officer, E2 was fantastic. He's in part of the crowd right now. I really wanted to do a shout out to him, because he was really fantastic. He really sat with us for the 6 months, 9 months process, and really understood like what should we be protecting, as well as how much would this cost. Whether filing a pattern for every single country that we're going to possibly expand to, did it make sense? Because after all, filing a patent is not cheap. So we did protect our trade secrets as well. We did protect some of the important things. We did protect, lock up our recipe, like how Coca-Cola did. We locked our recipe in a safe. We make sure that to sign NDA with all these are not expensive, because you just draft a legal document, it probably costs a couple of $1,000s, but this is protection. Then you go for the bigger ticket items like patents. So I would suggest that, and maybe do a bit of selling of Koyok to IPOS also, that for any SMEs that are bootstrapped, have a chat with IPOS. They would probably be able to advise better in order to work out this entire journey and to protect what needs to be protected first. Thank you.
Thank you, Benjamin. I think a big shout out to the IPOS International team as well. Great job you have done. Thanks to you. I think I've heard some testament of your great work. Right, Tyler, Now for you, I have a question, and I think it's very relevant to our topic here. And I'll just read it out. And this question is from Gary. So we summarize it from his actual comment. And it says, we actually have many of the intangible assets you listed, but we face the scenario about how defensible these intangible assets are in the commercial world of very quick copycat. And we just also want your opinion as well as your professional comments on the differences of protecting both registrable and non-registrable assets that we are talking about today, like the trade secrets and the confidential information. If you could, Tyler?
Okay, sure. So, I think the most important part of that question is you need to have a plan in place. You need to have an IP strategy from the start. Because if you just go and plow forward, you're not going to know which ones are valuable and which ones might be copied, and it might be too late if you go out to market with your great ideas or your great designs too early. So you want to just have a plan in place that will help you to identify which ones are defendable, which ones are not. Do a quick audit and try to identify all the valuable intangibles that you have. Talk about the strengths and weaknesses of each of those. And then that will outline what you should do and how you can look at different scenarios and best align your IP so that it doesn't get copied, and so that you can reach your ultimate end goal. Because you may decide, well, I want to sell my company. Well, there's certain ways to defend it in that method. But if you want to be a licensing company, then you have to have very, very rigid and strict IP protection to be able to have the legal documents in place to license that. If you want to get into joint ventures or other types of transactions with your company, you use different strategies. So, speak with EverEdge, speak with IPOS around putting together an IP plan, an IP strategy, and that will help you from the beginning.
Thank you, Tyler. With respect to the same question, does any of the other two panelists have any comments to add? Right, in terms of whether protecting the non-registrable IP versus the registrable IP, and the fact that we need to have an IP strategy. Do you have any comments to add from your own experience and your journey?
I think the strategy is really very important, as what Tyler mentioned. Only with a strategy, then you can work backwards to see how much money and budget you actually want to commit to this. So I fully agree with what Tyler said. You definitely need a strategy.
Great. And I fully subscribe to that as well. That in order to have a robust protection and commercialization strategy, you really need a plan, right? You can't just be slipshod about that. Okay, I'll move on to the next question. Let me just have a look at what we have here. Okay, there is also a question on the IP protection itself with respect to the fast-moving technology space, right? So which means, is that still relevant, and how do you go about doing that in a world whereby technology is always changing, always catching up, and always surpassing yours? How do you balance between IP protection versus the fact that the technology has always been catching up and moving ahead? Right? Does any of the panelists would want to take this question for now?
I'll kick that off quickly.
Sure.
I think the biggest misconception that most companies have is they look at patents and trademarks and say, well, these are going to protect my space. These are going to protect my market share. And so I'm going to go out and get a patent. And they think it's going to act as a shield for them to keep people out. But it doesn't actually work that way. If you think of it in that way, patents and trademarks really act more as a sword, not as the shield. They act as a tool to help people keep people out of your space. But you have to be willing to have the money and the resources to go out there and say, hey, you can't copy me, get out. Right? It doesn't automatically just keep people from copying you or doing what you're doing. You have to have the resources and use it the right way. So in the case where if your product or service is going to be moving fast enough that, especially in autonomous robots or in chemical compositions with Spic and Span, if you're changing your product every 6 weeks, or you're trying a new product or solution, some of the elements you probably don't want to bother with formal IP registration, but there might be underlying elements that are unique and different, in which you do. So talk to an IP specialist to understand and identify which of those are long-term and which are short-term, so that you know which one you might want to protect as trade secret, or which one you want to look at legal protection, and look at patents, trademark, copyright as the right tool to defend those products.
Right. Thank you, Tyler. And maybe to the other two panelists, if you could share your thought process as to the decision between keeping something confidential or as a trade secret versus patenting it. Right? I think that there must be, I can see Ting Ming already putting a bubble on the head. Yeah, can you share with us, right? I think everybody wants to know, with a bootstrap, with a very tight budget, how do you decide between patenting versus keeping trade secrets or confidential information?
Well, I would say if that's something that is very physical and people can really see it, then you be subject to a lot of copycats, right? So
Right.
maybe that's something very basic that you really want to consider to have some kind of a patent, right? As for the trade secrets, it could be your algorithms that you don't want to publish in the patent and show everybody, all your super algorithms, right? So those are still very basic things, but however, maybe I would like to share one predicament that we actually, have along the way, which is as things move so fast, right? So we have filed a patent. Then while in the PCT period, so we file a provisional, then the PCT, then we possibly have new things that come on board. So we would decide whether to add on to the first filing, or we're gonna create a total new patent. So that's something that I feel has also along the way kind of caught us in a very difficult situation, because things are so dynamic. And in speed is everything these days, right? So we wanted speed, but then again, you need to think about the long-term effects. If you were to file it together, then you cannot break it apart later. So these are the things that we did not really think so much, but during this period, we actually bumped into a few of these scenarios, and that really, get us thinking, these are the things that will happen more often in the near future.
Right. Thank you. I'll move on to Benjamin. Maybe if you could quickly share with us as well, right? I think what made you decide to have a patent for your business? Yeah.
I think we face the same scenario as what Ting Ming mentioned, that when we have filed a patent, there are many new evolutions that come out. There will be new competitors that also claim the same things as you or similar things. And I think these are things that will affect our decisions as well. I think one of the technologies that have broke into the disinfection space will be what Ting Ming has also mentioned, the UV technology. So we had to also adapt to it, that do not allow to see UV as a competitor. We actually recreated the formula and enhanced our formula to be complementing UV technology as well. So I think when you are able to convert a potential competitor into something that you can complement with to boost the effect of your killing measures, then you can deconflict a lot of things as well. But straight specific to the point, I think secure what can cause the most damage to the growth of your company. I think that is more important. So for example, in the disinfection space, what would cause the most damage to us at that phase of time would be someone like our manufacturer taking the recipe and selling to someone else. This would be the most damaging. The next most damaging would be our scientists taking our formula and going with someone else. So we secure those two things first, even before thinking of a patent. So it's
Right.
more of incremental stages that we take in order to protect what we have and secure what is most important.
Thank you, Benjamin. And looking at the time, I probably want to have a final concluding question. And I'm sure a lot of the people listening in will want to know, after all that has been discussed, what is really the value of intangible assets? And if there's actually an advice for the people that are listening in on why they should actually kickstart their IP strategies journey, right? Maybe if you could just give one word of advice, right, in order to secure the value of IP, right? Why is it important to invest early? Okay, maybe if I could start with Ting Ming, followed by Benjamin, and Tyler. We'll be happy for you to give us a closing remark for that as well. So Ting Ming, why should anybody spend on IP right from the start? What kind of value does it bring?
So I would say I actually started more on the solution and service-based business before I got into the startup of robotics, right? So precisely I wanted to do something different because the service-based and the solution business, the funnel is getting narrower and narrower. So we wanted to have our own brand name, our own IP, our own technology. That was the motivation why I went to US 5 years ago in search of a new business, right? So with that, we wanted to do something different, and we see a future that we are building onto, right? We don't want to wait till the economy get disrupted and we get hit by the tsunami. Then it will be really too late. Second of all, I think in the business itself, I think know-how is very important, as well as if we are in technology. Now, how do we protect this technology that we have invested over time? Now, you have to hire very talented people, and these people tend to come and go because headhunters will come after them once they get successful and the company gets successful. So this is a constant challenge that we all face, right? So people will naturally come and go, but the company has to stay, the company has to survive. Now, all these things that we have spent millions of dollars to build upon, we need to protect it so that the company has future. Even though people come and go, company stays. And even maybe one day I'm gone, the company still continues, right? So it's not about just about the people, but how do you protect these assets that you have built up over time, especially we are a tech company, right? Nothing is more important than tech. Of course, we are people company, so the talents in the company is also the key to the survival of the organization as well. Right. So knowing all these things, these are the important things that we are always bear in mind since day one. Yeah.
Thank you, Ting Ming. So the theme that I'm hearing is that invest in IP for the sustainability and longevity of the company, right? That is a good start. Now, Benjamin, very quickly, what is your advice for SMEs or people that are listening in, why they should be investing in IP?
Okay, I think we can zoom it out and mention that for all enterprises, how you earn money is actually what is the value you provide to your clients. What's the value you create for your clients? And the value that you create is actually your differentiator. The only way you're going to get that deal is based on what differentiates you. And what differentiates you is actually your IP. And this is based on whatever framework that you have, whatever business model that you have, whatever strategy that you have. So if you're able to understand this, what differentiates you, put that in a formal structure, protect it. This is what's going to help you make money.
Okay, thank you so much. So there's sustainability, longevity, value to customer, right? That's what we are looking at. Yes. Tyler, if you could have your comments as well.
Yeah, well, I tell my clients that we work with through a four-stage process. Identify your assets, evaluate the strengths and weaknesses, then manage them, make sure they're protected, and then you can actually monetize them. So if you want to make money from them, you can't skip any of those steps. And so if you're looking at, do I spend money, do I not? Well, you look at, is it going to be valuable in the long term? Will this generate commercial benefit or competitive advantage for my company? Then you should look at, okay, work backwards and say, what are going to be the assets that are going to help me do that? Should I spend money on it? And make that decision. But through that process, first identify it, evaluate it, manage them, and then you can finally monetize those assets.
Right. Thank you, Tyler. So sustainability, longevity to company, value to customer, as well as being able to curate and monetize, so that actually the business actually thrives and is able to do a lot more than what it can do without the IP. Thank you so much, panelists. Before we go, if you are thinking of how then are you able to make use of all that has been shared by the esteemed panelists here, a lot of insights. IPOS has some of the tools as well as the programs that you can look into. So if you could put on the slides for me. Right, the first tool that we are looking at, one slide before that, yeah. If you're thinking of some self-help, there are all the business guides that are available to you free of charge, right? So any of you out there who is thinking of having a quick start self-help, this is something that you can think about. Next, please. And if you are actually wanting to have a deeper conversation, right, deeper learning actually of intellectual property, there are multiple courses that you can go to as part of IPOS International's outreach as well. There's actually IP fundamentals, and for the more advanced people, there are actually the strategic IP management for businesses. So if you have gone past the self-help stage, you want to know a bit more, you can actually sign up for such courses as well. Next. And if you actually want someone to talk to about your intangible assets, there's actually a complimentary 45-minute chat that you can sign up for. And the QR code is there. And I think in the follow-up email, all this will also be made available to you. Next, please. And last but not least, we help ourselves, right? All of us here are all part of the ecosystem. And IPOS is actually conducting a survey. And as part of the IP strategy series, IPOS is actually conducting a survey to understand how organizations make use of trade secrets, right? These are intangible assets that give companies an edge over competitors, as shared by the panelists just now. It's a 10-minute survey, right? These are the various links to the survey site itself. It will be great. I mean, IPOS will be grateful if you can actually take some time to fill up this survey. Okay, I think in view of time, perhaps the information itself will also be sent to you via the follow-up email if you have actually given the email address to IPOS. The slides, the resources, as well as the survey links will all be made available to you in the follow-up email. So with that, without keeping you back, I would just like to extend really my own round of applause for the panelists here. I think really very good insights that I've seen. I've shared really on the ground experience of how they have managed to manage their IP well. And Tyler, thank you. I think from the perspective of a professional helping companies, I think very useful as to the steps that you need to take into consideration, right, if you want to manage your IP. With that, thank you for joining the webinar. And I look forward to seeing everyone again in future events of IPOS International. Thank you.